Let's see, commissioners present are everybody from our commission here. How about your board?
We are missing Peggy and Paul Fox and Aaron Mora, who you just allowed his resignation of.
Yep. Well, that'd be kind of tough to show up, huh? Never yet. No, appointments committee hasn't made a change yet. I have to open up for a public comment on the agenda items that are in front of us this evening that I don't have. So anybody from the public want to come forward to the microphone and talk about this special meeting, please come forward at this point in time.
Ad hoc committee.
Yeah, seeing nobody coming forward to speak about the ad hoc committee, we'll move into the nuts and bolts of this thing. Mrs. Ridley, let's start off with what you're thinking.
Okay, well, as you will recall, you created an ad hoc committee. Mine's not out. Okay, there we go. You created an ad hoc committee last fall that was comprised of two members from the Downtown Development Board, someone from the Tax Increment Finance Authority Board, 2 city commissioners, and then some staff members. And that group looked at all of the master plan information and various surveys that were done of downtown and looked at what downtown should be. And then they looked at what we had been spending money on downtown, not really paying attention to the source of those funds, and spent a lot of time reviewing information provided by both Michelle and Chris on how money was spent. And then they talked about additional things they would like to see happen downtown that would improve our downtown, and kind of prioritized those and had some discussions about where those should be paid from. So in the report that they did, there was an executive summary, and the last page of the executive summary basically summarizes the results of their recommendations. And the top half of it, and I have some extra copies of that executive summary if anybody would like those, the top half of it looks at how the funds have been being spent downtown, and quite a bit of scrutiny on those funds was accomplished by the committee. So we looked in total what was spent down there, and then made some decisions about how can we simplify where the funds come from that. And so the recommendation is basically anything that has to do with events and decorations should be paid from by the general fund dollars. Anything that has to do with capital infrastructure or with staffing should be paid for with the Tax Increment Finance Authority dollars. And then the special assessment dollars should be used for parking lot maintenance and enforcement, marketing and promotions, and beautification. And so that really simplified how things were paid for, so that only one bucket was paying for any source of fund or any use of funds. Then the second half of the page, let me back up. So if you look halfway through, it shows total operating uses. So what this says is, in order to do what we're currently doing downtown, requires a general fund contribution of $87,650 and a special assessment level of $100,810. And then if you wanted to do additional things downtown, that's what the second half of the page prioritizes for you, is what those additional things are. And again, the committee made recommendations about what the funding sources of those should be. So if you did everything that the committee recommended, the general fund contribution would become $111,200, and the special assessment would become $115,480. So that's the recommendation from the ad hoc committee. And this has been shared with both the Tax Increment Finance Board and the Downtown Development Board. And the Downtown Development Board has asked that you have some discussion with them about your priorities and hear what they have to say before they start going down the road of actually recommending a special assessment to you for 2016 and the future. So the rest of the meeting is yours to discuss with the board.
Thank you very much. Back to you in a little bit. Well, thank you very much. So pretty open, relaxed meeting at this point in time. We're going to sit around the table, talk about what you're thinking. You know, it's tough because we have two different boards here. I know you want to increase funding for the downtown. I believe it's necessary for the downtown. We just have to figure out if the general fund obviously can handle the excess load. If I'm not mistaken, it was roughly, I was going to bring this up on my email I sent off, it's somewhere in the mid $38,000 increase if both funds are approved. So the general fund and the special assessment that you're recommending from there. And so, there and there, yep, thank you. And so just open discussion, question, answer session. We're here to work through this and come up with a solution that works. How about that? Do you have anything to add at all, Madam Chairman?
Just one little comment. So we did have a couple of public informational outreach items that we tried to get other downtown businesses to kind of have some input that we could bring to you. We have a monthly meet and greet for downtown business owners and property owners and employees. In our last meet and greet, which was held 2 weeks ago almost, we had Downtown Development Board members, but we also had, let's see, 5 non-Downtown Development Board members there, where we had a very lively discussion about downtown and what is wanted for the future and things like that. We also sent out a survey kind of ranking the bottom half of the list into 7 things that you might want: hanging baskets, Christmas decorations, events, and had 20 responses from those members who were nice enough to respond. Nothing stood out as far and above as far as what one person wanted. Everything was pretty equal, except for power washing sidewalks was down on the list as a less desirable thing out of all the items. So we've had some input, not a lot. Nobody's been angry. No one has come and said, why are you raising my taxes?
Well, that was going to be my question, because obviously special assessment is going to come through our board, and I know that people are going to come forward.
Right, they sure will.
And have they talked much at your meetings about this at all?
I've tried to get information out there via emails, and we go around and personally, the Downtown Development Board members personally invite people, and on those handout flyers, and I tried to get them to say, this is about our special assessment, this is about taxes, please come and talk to us because this has to do with your taxes.
Good.
And nobody so far has come and said, Michelle had one phone call that said, where is the special assessment and how do I pay it and when do I pay it? And we said, it's been on your tax bill for years. And
Yeah.
I said, oh, look at that, it sure is.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you did that outreach. I mean, 'cause that makes sense to
We're
do that, and you did that, so there's no blindsiding anybody, obviously. And when I look at the special assessment side of it, it's not like it's an overall per person a lot. You know, you could have really jacked it up to $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. You know, that might have brought people's attention, but I think they know it's all good for the downtown. So, and it goes right to the downtown. Where on the other hand, general fund dollars are harder for me as a city commissioner, just because we look at other departments, or I look at departments when the budget comes around and no one's received an increase. And so that's obviously, it's hard for me, but I also know the heart of a community is your downtown. So that's where I'm at so far. So that's why I'm glad we're having these discussions here. Anybody else? Let's, questions, comments, concerns about this? Commissioner Kulik.
We're starting to, I know it ebbs and flows, but we seem to be getting a lot of vacancies in the downtown again, and if we wanted to use some incentive money to enhance or entice businesses to move downtown, we could conceivably take that out of the economic development funds that the city already has, that we don't have to worry about accounting for it here. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And that is something that we looked at a few years ago. There weren't very many vacancies, so people kind of let it go by the wayside. And it has been discussed at the meet and greet last month. It was very heavily talked about, coming up with an incubator program, which we have, you know, it was 3 years ago or so, we kind of came up with a game plan and how that could work. We decided that for this purpose, it would be better spent coming up with rather than a space as an incubator program, as a program where it's like shared rent. So the first year you get, I'm making up numbers here, but 75% of your rent paid for. The second year, 50% of your rent The third year is 25% until you're on your own to help offset those costs. But it is something that we could come up with. I think the downtown members are very concerned about the retail right now in downtown. There's statistics that show 10, 10, 10, so within a 3-block radius, you should have 10% of your, or 10 businesses that are retail, boutique stores, 10 businesses that are restaurants and have food, ice cream, coffee kind of things, and 10 of those businesses should be open past 6 in the evenings, past 6 o'clock at night. And I don't know if we have that. And
That mix.
we have to have that mix to have a really vibrant downtown. So I think that there's a lot of concern right now. I think that downtown
Especially on the
development
retail
board,
side.
right.
Commissioner Joslin, what are you thinking?
I think if we do everything, I'd see a $184 increase in my taxes. Not bad.
That's better.
Thank you. When I just did the calculation, and I apologize, I haven't been to any of the meetings. I'm working out of town, and quite frankly, I just rent the buildings now, don't run them. That is a blessing in disguise. But downtown businesses are struggling. We see it with the vacancies. We see it with my tenants. You know, we're just talking right now about re-upping the lease, and you know, what I can get for rent out of a building downtown isn't as much as the mortgage payment, and that's a bad day for anybody, whether you're a business owner or a landowner. So our downtown is struggling. So throwing more money at it, I don't know if that's the solution. I've always been a fan of the incubator program because to start a new business is very difficult. First few years are extremely difficult, but we need to do something in downtown to get the energy back. So these businesses that are down there can survive. But necessarily increasing their taxes, I don't know if that's the solution. $184 shouldn't make or break a business. Unfortunately, sometimes you add all those $100 here, $100 there, they add up, and you know, a lot of you folks are business owners, so I'm not preaching to the choir here. But like you said, to add more general dollars to it too, now all of a sudden we have to justify that to the community. And when you have businesses continually going out, that's what they see. Unfortunately, that's what people will come at me and say, why are you spending more on my tax dollars when there's no businesses there and everybody's closing shop? And I realize that's not what's happening, but that's the quick response that we'll get from people is, you're going to spend more on my tax dollars to supplement downtown when everything's leaving. And in reality, not everybody's leaving, but because we've had 2 or 3 businesses go out just this year, that's going to be a tough argument to get passed through. So it's a concern. There's a lot here, and I know the different events. The events have been great. I mean, the movies, the painting. Thank you, by the way, for painting the intersection. I always appreciate that. I think that makes our downtown unique. But unfortunately, they cost money, and that's got to come from somewhere. And I don't know if this is the answer, or I guess I'm just waiting to hear what everybody else has to say and where the public comment comes in at.
Yep. Commissioner Ling, I think you got something to say. You give me that look.
Well, mostly I was just looking at what, for me, it's the general fund expenditure that I'm most closely looking at, because I'm assuming we're going to hear from the people who are being special assessed about what their concerns are. So I was just looking at the reason for the increase in the general fund, and this is what I'm seeing, that about $12,500 is just to continue what exists now, and that we made somewhat, last year we had an increase in order to just cover our current costs, as I understood it. That was just so we broke even, so we were no longer in a deficit. And then I saw the 10-week series, the 10-week event series. I just wanted to ask exactly what we're envisioning for the 10-week event series.
So, and this is a very big picture idea of, similar to tie into the Max and Emily's concert series, which are the larger version of it, but close off a section of the street, say every Thursday night. So out of the 10 weeks, Tim has 3 of his concerts scheduled, but the other weeks, I think we budgeted $500 for entertainment and $200 for advertising and marketing, and bring in different groups. So maybe we do a tango lesson in the street, and we do a yoga lesson, and we have street performers, and you essentially have a very festive atmosphere downtown every Thursday night for the summer time, and you kind of create that, let's go downtown and spend downtown and shop downtown and be downtown and have an active community.
So it's designed primarily to bring people downtown, sort of related to what I was kind of hearing Commissioner Jocelyn say, which is what are the things that we can do to kind of pep up things and give people reasons to come down. So that's as I heard you saying that, my reaction was kind of like, well, I think that's what these events are about, is trying to bring people down. And then the other expense was the Christmas silhouettes, which we already had a fair amount of discussion of. We need to do something to replace the beautiful lights we had before, but which we, of course, can't do anymore because of the fact that we don't have the trees there, and problems that were related to putting them in the trees anyway, even though it did look awfully nice. But, and I have said before, I'm very much in favor of our having some nice-looking Christmas decorations. It seems to me a town of our size ought to be able to be proud of what downtown looks like and during the holiday season. So I don't really have any problems with it. I think that the request that's been made in terms of what we would be using the general fund money for is appropriate.
Very good. Commissioner Kulik.
The Christmas silhouettes, if I recall, most of that's a one-time purchase, and then it would drop back to just installing and taking that. Is that correct?
Right, so on the bottom half of the thing, it says that the Christmas silhouettes is a $34,000 purchase, essentially, with annual installation fees about $3,300, where right now we're spending $26,000 a year. So within 2 years, you've saved money. So we can then either add other things if we need to add things, or we just have that savings.
So can I ask you, so is the assumption then that in subsequent years you wouldn't necessarily be requesting $111,000 from the city, from the general fund, or that it would be used for other things, or would there be a reduction?
It'd be up to Michelle.
The answer for Nancy is no, that would not be me.
If you wanted to continue to give us $111,000, I don't think we would turn it down. But
potentially.
I think that most of the Downtown Development Board came in here thinking that if we can agree on maintaining what we have now, we're good, and anything else that you give us is a bonus. So, and I speak kind of for myself, but we had a little discussion, and after last year's special assessment request that caused this whole thing, I think that we kind of coming into this thinking that if we get anything, it would be fantastic.
Well, if I may add too, I think kind of answering John's question, I think one of the things is we need the city commission to look at is how can we sell downtown Mount Pleasant? I mean, we've had some businesses that have closed up, but they've closed up for various reasons. They haven't closed up because they haven't had the money coming in, the flow coming in, but they weren't able to sell their businesses. And why couldn't they sell their businesses? So what are we doing that's not making Mount Pleasant an attractive place? I mean, and as far as, I'll be, maybe this sounds bragging, but I've been there 19 years, going on my 20th year. I've only had one down year from the prior year. And that was when we tore out the parking lot behind us, which we're hoping will someday be finished. And so, and also we were going up against a football season where we had 7 home games. Jim can appreciate this. 7 home games where we led with Michigan State, and we had Navy and Western, to 5 home games the next year where we had 2 of them November 22nd and November 29th. I mean, you couldn't make up those days. you couldn't, I mean, we lost almost $100,000 just in football Saturdays, just in Saturdays in our sales. So to say that the downtown, that people can't make it downtown, that it's lacking something, I don't know if I totally buy that. I think that the people come downtown, they will come downtown. We just have to continue to give them a reason to come downtown and want to be part of something. I mean, you know, when I get new employees, I tell them we're not just selling sandwiches. I said, at Max Nimley's, you're selling Mount Pleasant. You know, and so we can create, we have some pretty neat things. When you look at the list of events that we put on downtown, in conjunction with the help from the city, it's a pretty impressive list. And we get thousands of people who come downtown. What we just went through with our outreach. I mean, the interest is there. We just have to tap into it. And how do we sell that so that we can get people who want to come in and grow? And we can't do it on the cheap. You know, we have to be willing to spend some money to make some money. And if there's economic development money, and I know there is because I was on the Planning Commission for a long time, I don't know what we're using that money for. I hope we've gotten a lot of interest from it sitting in the bank because I don't think we're doing that anywhere in the city. And so what can we, and I think that's the bigger question, is what can the commission do to help make sure that the downtown is seen as something that's viable and is seen as something that's cool. I mean, I certainly hear enough, oh, I wish we were like Ann Arbor, oh, I wish we were like this. Well, you know, we aren't, but we are Mount Pleasant. And we should be proud of where we are and make it the best we can make it and get people involved in this. But that has to come from our city base, and that has to come from our taxpayers and everything else. And I think we can do it, but we have to be able to stand up for it when we say, yeah, we're giving an extra $35,000 or $50,000 to promote the downtown, make it beautiful, staff, the city staff, so that they can do the jobs that we need to do. And it'll all continue to run because the energy is down there, you know.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah. Vice Mayor.
I thought it was very important that we hold this joint meeting. Last year when we had this discussion, I think it was really difficult because the Downtown Development Board had worked so hard to present the numbers, to put it together, and then when it came back to the City Commission, without them being present, each one of the city commissioners had heard from specific segments of the downtown or other people that had called them. So each city commissioner had their own questions, which the members of the DDB were not there to be able to properly answer them. So that's why I really appreciate this forum, and hopefully those questions can be asked and answered tonight. I believe in our downtown, and I think we as a city need to do everything we can to promote it. I was downtown on Saturday with my daughter helping to paint the street, and even though that was not the proposed date for it because it had been rained out twice before, it was pretty cool that it was happening this past Saturday because there were a lot of parents bringing their students up to campus for the first time, moving them in. And in the few hours that I was downtown, the number of parents I saw walking around the downtown, seeing this great community event going on, you know, that's what they're going to remember for the next 5 years. They're going to be coming back here. So in addition to trying, you know, what do we got to do to attract our own citizens to come downtown? You know, getting those parents when they come in town for special occasions. You know, and had we not had the Paint the Street event Saturday, I don't think we had any other event planned for, you know, what essentially was move-in weekend, which would have been a great opportunity to bring something downtown. So hopefully we can accomplish something tonight and, you know, put our money where our mouth is, as I've said all along.
Very good. Mr. Suit, do you have anything you want to bring to the table?
I was just,
Anything that you'd like to recycle?
well, everything you I was actually just curious about the architecturally pleasing incentives that were listed on the additions. What was that? What would that entail?
Under the TIF funding?
The ad hoc committee, Tim and Rick and Tony were there when we had this discussion, talked about some of the building fronts are looking kind of sad and dated. So it was an idea to have a pot of money and a application fee for it, so you can have up to kind of, it's rather than saying you get $5,000 to renovate the front of your building, so say the old National City building that ICCU is on now, right, on Main and Broadway, has an old dated front on it. So say the property owner there said, I want to redo the front of my building. Rather than saying, well, can I get $5,000 to help with it, he can say, I want a matching fund up to a certain amount of money, and the TIFA board can look at that, or whoever decides can look at that and say, okay, we had 10 people apply, we're going to give them each $2,000 this year, or we're going to put all our money towards this one project.
Sorry.
And help
Be safe.
renew.
Score.
What's the score now that?
Hold that thought.
5-0. I didn't realize it was still on,
Detroit's
sorry.
winning 5.
But they are winning.
All right, Allison, what do you got?
So to help make the fronts of the buildings look as vibrant as the insides are, essentially, kind of help create a better street front appearance.
So is that something that would be budgeted every year then?
That would be the hope. And it could be a rollover fund, so if no one applies this year and you have 5 people apply next year, you can kind of do this.
And that's part of the TIF capture that you're looking at for those
That
funds.
would be from TIFA.
Okay.
Tony?
That's what I was going to say. It was going to be a rolling fund, so that if nobody used it this year and you had a really big project next year, you might have, like that building that you were talking about, the National City, to take off all that armor that's been placed on the building would be quite expensive, so.
And see, I see it as I'd rather do that out of our economic development fund. That makes sense to me to do that.
We're happy to take it from the Economic Development Fund if that's what you're proposing.
But I would rather take that away from the general fund and replace that, so your TIF funds can do other things, and we would have economic development for that facade improvement. And that's just one idea for me. I'm glad we're going through this. We should have done this last year, obviously, but because I love the idea. So, anyways, Kathy, what do you want to talk about? Welcome.
I want to talk about art. I'm kidding. I think it's very heartening. It sounds to me like everyone is saying the same thing. I understand what you're saying, John, about if people question it. And that's the beauty of having a city commission and who support what it is that we're doing, so that when you are questioned, that you'd be able to answer that really what we're trying to do is exactly what Tim said, is enhance the downtown, because, which came first, the chicken or the egg? But people, if they're going to come downtown, we have to give them a pleasant, welcoming environment, and something that's safe, and something that's clean, and hopefully something that's fun. To me, it's not complicated, and that's, as a member of the Downtown Development Board, that's my commitment to doing that, and that's like the 10-week Thursday night events. We had talked about trying to do it last year, but the finances we didn't have. So it is just exactly what Allison was saying. We're just trying to do some kind of an event that gets people down here. It is just to see and have it be fun, and have it be safe, and have it be clean, much like the Max and Emily's concerts. There were 2,000 people down here sitting in the street and dancing, and I don't know, you can't buy that kind of stuff. Well, you can, but, sorry.
Big shooter.
We're buying it this week.
So that's why, my understanding is that's why we're doing this, because last year, when the special assessment was turned down, we as a Downtown Development Board thought, let's make sure that the City Commission is on board before we go forward and make this recommendation, because we're all big boys and girls and nobody wants to spin their wheels for nothing. So I'm very heartened by what I'm hearing.
For myself, single commissioner, fine with special assessment. use the Economic Development Fund for $25,000 for a program on the architecturally pleasing incentives, and keep the general fund structure the way it is. That then basically takes care of your increases all three ways.
I don't understand that part about leave the general fund the way it is, because that's coming out of the TIFA funds. So your general fund contribution is still needed at
The
$111,000.
TIFA comes over and funds the other items.
So instead of.
I don't know if it can, is the question.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's part of our dilemma, is what
Do
it
you-
can be used
Do you
at.
use the TIFA money to plug the hole for the replacement of the silhouettes?
Correct, things like that. I mean, funding in downtown is necessary. I see it needs to get done. I love the ideas that are here. I love the power washing, because I think the downtown is a little bit dirty and aged, and that's just because of the age of the streetscape landscaping. It's just showing itself over the last, I don't know how long it's been, 25 years since that streetscape got completed, if not more. I love the facade idea. I'd like to see McGurk do that with his building. He's got interest into that. He wanted to do some stuff from that, but there's some funds being held up because of another project, which is unfortunately not moving forward or fast enough. I'm just trying to find a creative way to make this whole thing work and get what you folks want to make this right.
Well, there's also the question too, and it's not on this. You know, the special assessment the last 2 or 3 years, I mean, we pay for the snow plowing.
Yep.
Okay, there's been a carry forward money because we haven't had the snow plowing. And really, we need to have some type of idea of what do you guys think we should have as kind of a fund balance, and what do we do with that extra money? Because I believe right now it was around $49,000 that's sitting there
Just for snow plowing, Tim, or?
in the snow plow.
Okay.
Because we just haven't needed the snow plowing. I mean, last year we had a lot of snow, but that all came at certain times. Plus, they changed the levels to the way they didn't plow the parking lots until 4 inches, which isn't
As long as, luckily, a
isn't
four-wheel
very
drive.
well received from people downtown, but, you know, still. But there's that money too. And what do we do with that money from the special assessment? And what dollar figure does the city feel we should have there? You know, do we need 49,000 because we're going to have the worst winter in the world, but we're also going to be, you know, or, you know, I mean, I think that's just money that's sitting on an account.
And I didn't know that, so absolutely, I mean, that's got to be looked at.
And as far as the economic development money, and maybe this is a Nancy question, but I hate for the city commission to say, yeah, we want the economic development fund to give this money, but I believe, isn't it the economic development, there's a board of their own that has to actually finally make that decision? Or can they take a recommendation from the city commission and then move on that?
The city commission has control over the economic development fund itself.
Okay, so that is something that can come from them.
So we would just need to make sure that it's appropriate uses of that funds, working with the attorneys and so forth.
So as we talk about that fund, I know it's been come up, it didn't come up in the ad hoc committee, but it has come up in a couple other discussions. Maybe we could also talk about the incubator program and some
sure.
funds to help create and finance that, to help with some, you know, retail or new businesses downtown.
Yes, John?
Couple additional thoughts, I guess. You know, I keep coming back to the loss of business. And, you know, Tim, you touched on it, and you have, and how we should be able to go out there and sell this pretty easily because we're supporting downtown. But we've been supporting downtown I've been supporting downtown since I've been on the commission for 15 years, constantly putting money at it. And we've lost in the last 2 years 6 businesses. That's a lot for your core district, 6 businesses. So are we doing the same thing? I guess that's what my concern is. It's not the money, it's are we doing the correct things with the money? And right here, what I see is a duplicate of what we've done for the last 5 years. And you say we got to come up with some place for downtown to be, and we've got to do these things to make it attractive. Well, then what have we been doing for the last 5 years? If we don't have that message out there already, what have we just been wasting? I shouldn't say wasting, spending our money inappropriately, because again, 95% of this plan is a duplicate of what we've done for the last 5 years. So are we changing enough to attract these businesses, to make the downtown attractive? Are we spending our money in the right spots? That's my big concern. When you lose 6 businesses, are you putting in the right spot?
But I think, John, you could have dancing bears downtown. Economics are going to play out no matter what you do. And if those businesses aren't going to work, they're just not going to work. You know, it's just the economy out there.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's a bad or a good economy. It's just, you got to look what happened in the township and the sprawl and the shopping, and that's the retail heart. That's the problem. It's the economics. The market's going to drive it. And you can have the biggest Ferris wheel downtown. If they don't want to go in that store, they're not going to go in that store.
I
That's the
couldn't
hard
agree
part.
more. But again, are we spending the money appropriately to make it feel like it's a vibrant downtown, to give the impression, to make it so people say, well, wait a minute, you spent $100,000 last year, and what did that get you? How do we counteract that?
I'm curious, I hear what you're saying. I respect what you're saying. What would you do differently?
I have no clue. That's why I was hoping somebody had, you know,
And
I
here's
don't know.
My other question for you is, you say you've been supporting downtown, but until this last year when city commissioners realized we had this deficit, you know, we were getting $55,000 a year to general fund, and it had been that way for 10 years. So 10 years ago, what we could get for $55,000 was a heck of a lot more than we can get now for $55,000. You know, even, let's talk about when we want to close the streets, how much does it cost for us to have the street department come close it? Or how much does it cost for us to have a stage put up downtown? You know, and these are things that are minute things that we keep dealing with over and over and over, but our budget is, although it's been the same, it's actually shrinking because some of the base costs that we have to afford, you know, have the way the city's set up, we pour our money from our bucket to the Public Works bucket when we need them to come do things for us, to put up banners or whatnot.
I couldn't agree with you more.
That keeps going up, so we're getting a lot and we're not getting that increase to help offset those costs. So you've been supporting it, and we've been doing the same thing, but we're actually getting a whole lot less because we have actually gotten the same amount of money. And I get that all other departments are getting the same, not very much money, but, you know, and Commissioner Holton, you said, well, it's general fund, where are we going to get this money from? This is one of the things that gets under my skin, because at the last meeting where we talked about this last year, and this was turned down for a $20,000 increase, or, you know, a $40,000 increase, but was really $20,000 more than what was already being spent. There was a request to build a sculpture to put in our sister city for $17,000 that was approved with zero discussion. You know, recently there was a request for $7,000 for commissioners to have new tablets. I'm not saying those things aren't important, but bang for your buck, I'm guessing if we had spent that 17 and that 7 and put it towards our downtown out of the general fund money, we'd probably have a lot more impact on the community as a whole than we did by buying tablets for 7 commissioners and installing a sculpture in another community.
I didn't take a tablet, by the way.
Well,
Well, and also, I mean, in tonight's discussion, I mean, DPW, you guys showed them a new idea, and they said they already bought the machine, and nobody knew that. And this is a department that has no budget. They have no budget. They earn their own money, and they went and spent $10,000 or whatever that the city commission didn't even realize they'd spent on a machine. You know, so I mean, the money's there, I think, to do the things. And I can understand what John's saying, but I think that it goes back to the broken window theory from Giuliani. If the storefronts are dilapidated looking, and because people can't afford to do this and that, nobody's going to want to come down here. You know, and we are doing the same thing we've done, but we're doing it with a lot less money than what we should be doing it with. And I mean, that's why when you look at the survey, one of the things is to try and fund appropriate staffing to help promote. I mean, I've watched over the last several years Michelle's job going from where she was really a downtown coordinator and working with the businesses to where she's kind of a grant writer and doing a much bigger picture things. So we don't have that person doing that position. She's doing great things, and we have some great things coming out of it, but we've lost that person who's going around and doing things. We've seen because of budget cuts, we've seen a lot of the events that we had, they've either been picked up by private funding. I mean, almost every event on that list, with the exception of Ladies' Night Out and Dickens, has been picked up by, is more than picked up by the private sector. We get help, but we do the bulk of it and things of that nature, and the bulk of the money's coming from however we go get the money. So, I mean, I think there's, I think I can understand why you don't want to, I mean, insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. I understand that, but I think some of it is that we do have to change. We have to have the appropriate amount of people out there marketing the downtown, getting people here, and maybe picking our weekends. I mean, one of the reasons we have the concert this weekend is because Saturday is a big move-in day for CMU. We do try and attract families down here. It was probably just, dumb luck that it happened because of the rain, but it got people here on Leadership Safari move-in. All we had was new families in Mount Pleasant that day, and we put a great foot forward there. So, I mean, I think we can do it. We might have to reassess how we're doing some things, but I think that a lot of the things we do really well, and we just have to continue to be able to let people know.
Lois, welcome to the table.
I understand what John is saying, but you don't kick a guy when they're down. We've lost some businesses, and you just have to stand up, brush yourself off, and go on. And by not giving a little bigger pot so that we can do the events that we have even better and bigger, that's not helping the downtown. That's not making me warm and fuzzy that everybody wants the downtown to go.
I guess, don't get me wrong by saying I don't agree that we need events and stuff downtown. My problem is, if we're putting on an event and it's not promoting downtown, it's not bringing the people down, should we continue to do that particular event? Is that the right spot to spend the money? Because obviously it obviously has something to do with economics when people go out of business, obviously. But if you lose 6 businesses in 2 years, and you can't sell them, even if they're viable business, people that aren't interested in coming down, are the events creating the atmosphere that we're after? I mean, or do you retool and spend the money in a different event or a different infrastructure, a different facade? I just want the DDB to be concerned or be looking at spending the money the best way possible to create the atmosphere that you want to.
And I think we do. Kathy is the chair of our Events and Promotions Committee, and Kathy is very big promoter of looking at what is the goal of the event, and afterwards assessing, did we meet our goal? So the Mardi Gras event, our goal was to bring CMU students down. That was the original goal of Mardi Gras. And we looked at it and said, you know what, this isn't meeting our goal. Let's try something different. And so we spent that money doing the zombie run, and then we assessed after that. And this year we don't have one, but we do assess. We look at those things, and Kathy is fantastic at looking at what is our goal of each event and following through and making sure that we're meeting our goal. Are we bringing down the people that particular event caters to? Obviously Dickens caters to families. So are we doing that? Are we getting the kids down here? The Pumpkin Promenade, that is specifically for young children. Are we doing that? How are we promoting that? What are we doing? Are we meeting our goal? Are we getting people to see our businesses? And then do we then hear about those events later? Do we have people come back and say, you know what, we came down later because we were here at Pumpkin Promenade and we didn't even know there was a bike shop in town. So now I'm here to buy my kid's Christmas bike. And we do surveys after every event to assess, how was it for your business? Was it successful? Did you like the event? How did you participate? So we do a lot of feedback, and I know the commissioners don't get that feedback, but it is continually happening, continually assessing and getting feedback on events. and whether we're meeting our goals of each event.
I do have one more question, and everybody will be mad at me for this one too, but if I don't ask it, I will not be representing the people that elect and vote as well. The special assessment is calculated equally for everyone. And there's quite a bit of argument out there on the outskirts of business people, on the outskirts of downtown, that don't see and get as much benefit on events, on activities, on landscaping, on lighting, and yet they still pay the same amount. I've always argued that, well, a strong downtown makes you strong as well. But has there ever been any discussion on having a tiered special assessment, that the core is at one rate versus the outskirts being a second rate? Because 90% of our events are on Main and Broadway. So when you're off those streets, they say, well, that event, nobody ever goes by me. All the traffic's in this core, that's where it's at. So it's an argument that's always given to me. It's very debated heavily. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I at least didn't bring it to the board and say, has there been much discussion on that?
Well, I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, Nancy, when I repeat this, but when we, at the ad hoc committee, we looked at what the special assessment pay versus what does the general fund pay. And the general fund is paying for the events. So special assessment is paying for parking lot, maintenance, snow removal, which you get at all of the locations because there are parking lots throughout. The lighting for those, groundskeeping. One of the things that we're talking about is that getting hanging baskets. So yes, in the center of downtown, we have the pots that the petunias go in. The outskirts, you don't have those. So when we talked about getting hanging baskets, we looked at getting enough for every place. That was a very large expense. So we said, what if we get 40? We do a kind of assessment of the downtown, and every year we add to those, and we start on the outskirts and bring them in to help ensure that those businesses that feel like they're being neglected are trying to get built up. And then the other thing that gets talked about a lot is the lighting, the pedestrian lighting on the outskirts isn't being included, and we did have that discussion as far as what we can do about it, that's a harder piece, but when it comes to the special assessment things, the things that special assessment does pay for are things that everybody kind of gets, minus some of the landscaping pieces, but we address that with the hanging baskets, which you won't find in the middle of town. You're going to see them on the outskirts if that goes through.
So this sheet that we have here, your breakdown of the sources, is this sources for the proposed 2016?
Yeah.
So we could give this to, when we mail out the special assessment, can we get this breakdown?
Yeah, we can mail it out. I think first the Downtown Development Board has to have the discussion about, which level, is it the 100,000 or the 115,000 that they're going to recommend, and then talk about the formula about it. But yeah, as that's done, we can include that kind of information
that would
in
help.
the mailing.
And this packet that you guys have right now, the whole thing has been emailed probably at least 5 times in the last 2 weeks to the email list, which includes about 85-ish% of downtown. Doesn't have everybody, but it is in their email continually. I'm trying to ensure that comes through. It comes from Michelle, but I've been having Michelle forwarded messages from me to that. Tony?
To an extent, you talk about tiered special assessment. Some of that's built into the special assessment now because the amount that you pay for special assessment is reduced by the number of parking spaces you provide for yourself. I mean, the argument would be that, I've got just a little mom and pop insurance office and I only need 4 parking spaces and I've got those behind my building. Why do I have to pay for the parking assessment? That formula is in the current way that the special assessments are figured. Could other things be added to that? Yeah, but you start making it so complicated, nobody can figure it out at that point.
Well, and that's why several years ago, the Principal Shopping District made it a statement that the only thing the special assessment could pay for was the snow removal, the maintenance of the parking lots, and the utilities. That's what the special assessment was for. The rest of the money was coming from the general fund, because people wanted to have something concrete. And that way, if somebody's on the outskirts of town, believe me, if the street wasn't plowed and their lot wasn't plowed behind them, they'd know about it, but it is plowed behind them, you know, and there is utilities there, and there's all those kinds of things. And that's the only thing that the special assessment has been paying for over the past, I don't know, 10 years or so. Ever since we got rid of the DCC, which used to cover those bills, you guys, City Commission would just give that money. And, you know, once it went to this other, that's how they wanted it done. And so that's the way it's been done. So special assessment has never been an event-based fund. So,
Commissioner Ling?
So that kind of brings us back to where we were, which is what's the point of our discussion? I mean, we can talk about the special assessment, but, you know, my feeling is if everybody's been notified, if we have public hearings on it, and we don't get people coming and objecting to the special assessment, I'm less concerned about levying that special assessment, and then the question becomes, how about our part of it? And to be honest, what I'm hearing is a pretty modest request. I mean, other than the cost of the silhouettes, which we've talked about as a one-time, and in the long run it's a savings, we're talking about $7,500 in order to have a 10-week series of events during the summer. And what was the other thing? And then the existing, what we're already spending, just making up for the deficit. That's essentially what we're looking at here, and then $3,000 a year to maintain the silhouette. So we're not really talking about that large an increase, and I'm very sympathetic with the argument that says we did go a very long period of time at the same amount, which is part of the reason why we were essentially deficit spending on it. So it's really, I see it as the city acknowledging, in many ways, what they've already been spending, because essentially we've been filling the deficit as the appropriation hasn't gone up enough to meet even the current expenses. I mean, if the city were unhappy with some of the events, I mean, I hear general discussion, but my impression is the events have gone well. I do see some changes over the last few years. I certainly think a lot of the outreach activities have ramped up significantly and have brought a lot of people downtown. So I'm not unhappy with the events, and I think, for example, for the Christmas silhouettes, I can't think of a more appropriate use of the economic development money, to tell you the truth. I mean, I don't see how a $30,000 or so expense for a silhouette in order to rev up the downtown and increase business, and potentially in the long run increase taxes by increasing business, is that much different than the money that we've given for a lot of the other things we've used the economic development for. So I'm perfectly comfortable with using economic development money for the Christmas decorations, for example. And I think unless we specifically think we don't like what the money's being used for, I don't have any problem with this, what I think is a relatively modest request.
Let me just clarify something on the special assessment, because Allison's right. This report has been sent out to a number of people, but what has not happened is the individual property owners have not gotten their letter that says the special assessment's being considered, here's what your assessment is going to be next year.
And we do have to hear what they have to say.
And that's typically when we hear from people who have concerns about it, so that has not taken place yet.
but I think something that's going to make that easy is 2 years ago. I mean, if we go with the $100,000 level, we got that commitment from 2 years ago. We held the meetings, we did all that. I believe they sent a letter out to everybody. You personalized it saying this is how much your increase was going to be. So everybody knew about it then, and not everybody was happy, but we had a general consensus that it was a good deal. So, you know, if we came out with the same thing 2 years later and said we still need to increase it, we're going to increase it just what we were the last time, it's not going to shock anybody.
I think that what we heard at a couple of meetings in January when we had the meet and greet event was that there were a lot of people who were surprised that it didn't go through. They thought that it went through. They thought that that special assessment increase happened. So I do think that when we send out the letter, we need to say, by the way, the last one didn't happen.
We typically show them their current compared to the proposed. They get both of them.
We should just show that the current is the same as it was 2 years ago, kind of a thing, just so that they're not thinking that it's an increase on top of an increase, because many people thought that it went through and that they were already having that increase.
Sarah, anything you want to add? Okay. Commissioner Verliger.
As you were.
Verliger.
I am actually in full agreement with Commissioner Ling. I think that anyone that knows me knows I'm not a huge proponent of special assessments, but I can't think of another one off the top of my head that would make more sense. You know, we have a phenomenal downtown area. I've lived all over the country, and my wife and I have decided to raise our 2 children downtown. We're 4 blocks from the downtown business district, and we've had opportunities to move to the outer areas of our community. And every time that conversation had come up, the downtown area is what has kept us here. We love being able to come down to the events with our children, and everything that our community offers down here is phenomenal. I gauge a lot of our downtown based not on what our own community members say, but folks that visit us, that visit downtown with us, okay, that come to the concert series or to the restaurants downtown, or visit the shops. People that live, all over the country that have visited us, comment on what a spectacular downtown we have. They like the kind of that quaint downtown feeling, but really all that it has to offer. And I understand there's businesses that have closed and come and gone, but I tend to think that's secular, and there are some vacancies, and there's going to be other, I think, business owners that'll take a stab at that eventually. We've seen it. We've seen vacancies that, somebody else in a year or so will come in and have an idea and take a shot at it. And I guess that's part of it. But again, I would support an assessment to do this. We treasure this community, this downtown area. We want to see it succeed, and I think it's a good idea.
Michelle, anything to add?
Not at this time.
Great. Commissioners, any final thoughts at this point in time? Obviously, this is going to come up to our agenda, but number one, I appreciate the time placed in this to know where the funds are going. I think last year was just a little bit of a rush for us to, extra money's needed. Where's it going to go? I don't know where it's going to go, and then we got some information here, and this has just been a better process for me, at least individually, to see exactly what's going on, especially being a downtown person that I am as well. So looking forward to this. I don't see it being a major issue moving forward, but there'll probably be some questions along the way, obviously, as we go through the process. Vice Mayor, do you have anything else to add?
No, I just wanted to thank the commission and the DDB for getting together. Again, I reaffirm that I thought this was important. I think it was essential that we got all of our questions out and we're able to get them answered in one session and get the concerns on the table versus going back and forth, meeting to meeting to meeting as we did before. So I want to thank everyone for being here.
Kathy, anything final at this point in time? Commissioner Seuss? Sarah, last chance.
Happy with everybody's response.
Mr. Kulik?
I agree with Commissioner Routman that the process of getting this document, having discussions all summer long, really cleared a lot of air. Where is this money coming and going? I think it answered a lot of questions, and I'm comfortable with pretty much what's here.
Thank you. Lois, anything? Commissioner Jaws and Commissioner Ling. Verliger?
All clear.
Brockman, good. Michelle, final thoughts? Are you sure?
Good.
Stay on mute. Allison?
Okay. My one last question to the commissioner. If we go forward and talk about the Economic Development Fund with an incubator program, because that's not included
Separate.
anywhere in this, how would you like us to go forward with coming up with a program, figuring out how many dollars worth of money we want to ask for, and how, just because John's going to get a lot of questions about businesses closing downtown, so I think that if we can say we're working on something sooner than later, it'll help him. How do we want to go forward with that piece? Because that's the one piece we mentioned but isn't included.
I believe Michelle and I can work with the DDB to kind of flesh that out a little bit.
But the way it would work is a proposal would come about what the incubator would be, how it would work, all the parameters of it, and a dollar request for that, and then that would come to the city commission for them to consider once they understood the format of the program.
We will have something to you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Do you have anything, Mr. Ridley?
You know me, I always like to make sure we are in agreement on next steps.
Oh, good. This
So
is
what
exciting.
I think I heard as far as next steps is that you'll be getting the 2016 operating budget at your next city commission meeting, actually. So we will incorporate this to the extent we can from the standpoint of building in the general fund request, but having some pieces of it funded out of the Economic Development Fund that you talked about tonight. And we'll build in the budget assuming the full special assessment and funding these items, but we all recognize it still has to go through the process. And depending on how that process goes, we can always amend the budget. But the Downtown Development Board can start moving forward with looking at the term of the special assessment, whether they want to change the formula, and start getting the information out to make a recommendation to you this fall.
It's a process, that's for sure.
That would be correct.
Good. Anybody in the public like to come forward to talk for 5 minutes at the podium about these issues? Do I have to do that by law? Okay. Seeing nobody, I'll close that and move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.